It's so hot, I can't think. Hey guys! Welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, my name is Savannah Rose and I make videos about how to live the brightest life possible, starting with what you have right in front of you. Recently, I have been doing that speaking from the perspective of having bipolar disorder. I mean, like, I've always been speaking from that perspective since I have bipolar disorder. Lately, I've just been weaving it into my videos because I think it's an important thing to talk about, especially because I found that there aren't a lot of people my age speaking on their experience with bipolar disorder. I am fortunate to have been diagnosed so young, and that sounds kind of funny, but there are so many people who don't get diagnosed until they're 30, 40, 50, and I'm very fortunate to have been able to go through this process early on. There are so many symptoms of bipolar disorder that can kind of disguise themselves as the same symptoms of other disorders, and so it's very easy to get on the wrong medications, to just be starting on the wrong path, not really knowing exactly what you need to go after in terms of treatment. In today's video, I wanted to talk to you guys about some of the delusions that I have experienced in having a manic episode. I have bipolar 1, which is classified by having longer manic episodes, typically more than 5 days, sometimes weeks, sometimes months. Mine tend to last several weeks to maybe a month or two, during which period of time I have an elevated mood, I get irritable really quickly, and at times I do experience delusions. Honestly, a lot of the time I experience delusions. One of the videos that I watched about bipolar 1 said that people with this disorder typically end up hospitalized more often than not at some point in their lives because of the fact that they experience psychoses, delusions, and things as such. However, I have not. People that I'm related to that have bipolar 1 have not. I don't want you to think that just because your delusions haven't gotten to an extreme point where you needed to be hospitalized for believing in things that aren't true, I don't want you to think that that means that you couldn't possibly have this, or I don't want you to invalidate yourself because you haven't been sent to a hospital. If anything, from my personal perspective, I'd say that that's a good thing because it means that your delusions are not so severe that they are affecting or endangering your life. I'm also not going to invalidate how difficult it can be to deal with delusions, especially if they tend to mesh themselves pretty well into something that might seem normal. In case you're wondering, there are different types of bipolar disorder. Bipolar 1 is what I have, which is prolonged periods of mania and shorter periods of like crashing and depression. And bipolar 2 is somewhat the opposite. If you have any delusions or psychoses, however, you automatically do not have bipolar 2, you are automatically bipolar 1. I'll put some videos down in the description below that helped me to educate myself on the differences between bipolar 1 and bipolar 2. I do not have a degree in psychology or in personality, mood disorders, so I just want to put that out there right now. This is all based on my research and the things that I have learned in my process of accepting my disorder. So just a quick note before I tell you guys about some of the delusions that I've had or circumstances that were caused by delusions that I've had. I just want to say that it was really hard for me to realize that I have delusions, that I go into psychoses at times, because I consider myself a very intuitive person. I trust my gut a lot of the time, and a lot of delusions disguise themselves very well. The difference, I would say, honestly, that I've been able to notice is that a delusion is going to be more of an impulse rather than a gut feeling, which sometimes it takes yourself a bit to push yourself towards doing what your gut tells you to do. For example, a gut feeling can tell you to leave a relationship because you're not happy or because it's not what you want. A delusion can tell you the same sort of thing, except it might be rooted in invalid causes. For example, when I am in a psychosis, when I am delusional, I believe wholeheartedly that I am polyamorous and that I want to have multiple partners and that I can fall in love with many people. And while I don't think that that's false, when I am level-headed, it's not a frequent thing. When I'm experiencing a psychosis, it's like anyone that gives me a smile and has anything in common with me is a potential I could fall in love with this person. And part of that's because when you're manic, you are somewhat of what my mom calls a stimulus monster. You just want to feel stimulated. You like feeling in love. I'm feeling how nice it is to have someone's attention on me, or how nice it is to feel validated. And in a way, this is nice because it gives me confidence, but it also is rooted in truths that aren't true. And that's how it can become dangerous. So just to rephrase, if you feel something in your gut, you're gonna on some level or not know that it's right. But that doesn't mean that you're going to do it impulsively. You're just going to know that that's what's right for you. And a lot of the times, honestly, it's really hard even for me to distinguish between an impulse and your gut feeling. But your gut is going to be more reasonable. It's going to come more from your heart, whereas an impulse from a delusion is going to be that. It's going to be an impulse. It's going to be like a snap 2-second decision of like, oh my god, I need to buy this ukulele because I'm going to learn to play the ukulele, and then you never actually do, which I've done that before. Or I should buy a cat. Oh my god, I really need to buy a cat, and then looking on Craigslist and then finding a cat and then having one for like a week and then realizing that it doesn't go in your household and having to return it. Yes, that is something else that has happened to me. So I want to share with you guys some of the biggest things that happened because of delusions that I have had, and I just want you to know that these are really personal things that I had to deal with and things that I'm still working on repairing. So honestly, it's hard for me to share. It's hard for me to admit these things to a camera, but I think that it's really important for people to understand, because there's a common misconception that bipolar disorder is just being really happy and then being really sad, and that's honestly not what it is. Delusions are very real in bipolar 1, and they are debilitating. They affect your life. They inhibit certain aspects of your life. You spend more money than you want to. You make poor decisions, like breaking up with your partner for invalid reasons and then later regretting it, or hooking up with somebody random and then realizing that it was really not a good decision and you were not in the right state of mind, or partaking in addictions to alcohol, to marijuana, to otherwise drugs that make your delusions even worse, or quitting just about every job you've ever had because of a snap decision. Granted, some of the reasons that I've left some of my jobs have been very valid. However, the way that I went about them, or not having a job lined up afterwards and having to leave right then, right there, is not a healthy decision. So one of the biggest things that ever happened because of a delusion that I was having was leaving my boyfriend. Fortunately, he is incredibly supportive, incredibly loving, caring, and understanding, and patient with me, and he has worked with me so hard through this. So Benjamin, I love you so much, and I'm so grateful for you. But until recently, for about 5 months, we were completely broken up because of a manic episode. So part of the reason that this manic episode started was because, as I have mentioned in other videos, in August, my dad disowned me, and we're working through it, all that good stuff, but that's what happened. And it was right before Benjamin moved out here to move here so that we could live together. We were supposed to live in the house with my dad and all pay rent and all that kind of stuff. That didn't happen. My dad ended up saying either I take the lease or he takes the lease, but he didn't want to live with me anymore, and I was not making the money for that. So we ended up moving into my aunt's house. It was so much to figure out, honestly. It was so much that I had to just power through, struggle through. We had to go to work. We had to work on our relationship, keep each other afloat. I was dealing with like his emotions from moving away from his family, as well as my emotions from my dad leaving me and us trying to find an apartment together. It was just a lot all at once. We finally got an apartment, and after that I started working 2 jobs. I was working about 50 to 60 hours a week. I was a barista as well as a kid club supervisor at a gym. And one of the biggest things, if you have bipolar disorder, I didn't know this until recently, if you are currently looking into a job, or you're at a job that doesn't make you happy, that makes you feel stressed out, makes your episodes worse, I found that working in customer service can be one of the absolute worst jobs you can have having bipolar disorder, primarily because you're not level-headed, you're not entirely in control of your mood, and you can get really irritable really fast. And having a super fast-paced, high-stress kind of job can be detrimental. It can propel you even further into a manic episode because you're having to work yourself up just to keep going until eventually you crash. Because the crash always happens where you regret absolutely everything. But because I was working so much, you couldn't talk to me about anything. You couldn't talk to me about my lack of doing chores around the house. You couldn't talk to me about how we weren't doing so great in our relationship, because I was so focused on my job. I was so focused on how stressed I was and how much I had to keep going just to make money. We fought over the drop of a dime. We got to the point where we weren't even having sex anymore because I just didn't want to. Nothing in me would allow myself to do that. And when we would try to, one or both of us would end up unhappy. And honestly, we had a healthy relationship. We talked about everything. We communicated very well. I didn't realize that my trauma was compounding with my work life, was compounding with this manic episode. I convinced myself that I didn't want him. I didn't want to deal with a relationship. I didn't want to deal with a boyfriend, and I needed to be on my own. And so that propelled itself in my mind for months. And I was in this manic episode until he left, when I immediately regretted everything. So we ended up leaving. I crashed for maybe a week where I felt everything of the breakup. I regretted it. I wanted him to come back. I felt horrible that things ended the way they had. I didn't even understand why I sent him away in the first place. Part of the reason he moved back, by the way, is because he wanted to go to college and he had the Cal Grant, which in California means you can go to school for full time for 3 years for free, like completely covered, besides like textbooks and materials and all that kind of stuff. So this is part of what I mean by delusions can really hide themselves well. There were so many reasons that he could or should move back that I was able to convince myself and him that this was a very serious, real thing that was going on, when in reality, I immediately regretted everything the second that I became level-headed and could think about what had happened between us and could think about him. I briefly mentioned this in another video, but after he left, I was working at this job where I was working 70 hours a week. So I had quit both my other jobs. I found another job raising money for a charity that I really support and I do care about immensely. But I was working 70 hours a week. The whole basis of the job was that it was an opportunity. You put in the work really hard at the beginning, and then you're supposed to get an opportunity to run your own office and to train your own people and to do all that stuff. So shortly after I came out of that depression and was starting to focus on work, I went away to a convention where they basically just showed us the opportunity in the company. We talked to a bunch of people who started their own offices and a lot of people that are working their way up, how they got successful. They talked about it just being so easy, and realistically, it's something I could have learned, and it's something I wasn't bad at. I made decent money, but I wasn't making enough money to justify working 70 hours a week, especially since in reality, I know that this is what I want to do. I don't want to own my own office. But unfortunately, I tend to be a very gullible person, especially when I'm delusional. So all the things that they told me seemed concrete to me, and I just ran with them. I went to that convention. I took all the notes I possibly could. I talked to so many different people. I came back and I was like, all right, we're doing this. Let's go. I convinced myself that I wanted to grow with this company. I wanted to move up in this company, and I wanted to become something with it. When in reality, they're kind of like a cult. Like, they expect you to hang out mostly with just them. They do not want you drinking or doing anything else outside of work. And you know, it's not like they tell you that you can't, but they like strongly encourage it, and they get all up in your business about stuff. If your car isn't clean, then your boss is going to say something to you about it because it's not professional. It was just like they just got too up in your space. And I didn't realize it because I thought I wanted to grow with them. And I was like, mixing work with play is not a good idea, which I find out in another delusion, which was meeting somebody at work where you are forbidden to date any of your coworkers. However, I convinced myself that I was meant to be with this person, and so I continued to do it anyway. I thought that it was really weird after Benjamin and I broke up that I didn't feel very much about it. I mourned for a little while for the time that I crashed, but then after that I didn't feel anything for months. And I thought that that was just the way that I dealt with a difficult situation. Granted, it's kind of similar to how I dealt with my dad, but I didn't realize that it was because it was mixed in a abnormal dealing with mood and emotions. So I didn't feel that much for months until the next time I got level, which didn't happen until April, and he left in December. We'll get there. So because I didn't feel anything and I thought that this is what I wanted, there was somebody at work who piqued my interest and I started to go for it. I just want to let you know that this is going to be really hard for me to talk about because it's embarrassing to find out some of the things that you thought were true, because you feel like an entirely different person, and it's really hard to accept the person that you were when these things happened. I genuinely thought that this person was like the one, or that we were meant to be together after very few interactions. And once again, I'm a very intuitive person. When I'm with Ben, I feel like he is the person I'm meant to be with. I feel that in my gut. I feel that in all of who I am, even when it's hard, even when I feel delusional. But in this case, it was very impulsive because I told myself, I don't want to be with anybody. And then all these things started to happen, and it was all very impulsive. We had very similar aspirations. We'd both considered moving to Hawaii and living out of a van. We both are very interested in yoga and meditation and self-help and things as such. However, because of these things, I was very easily jaded by the fact that this dude was super selfish, honestly not what I needed or wanted for my well-being or the well-being of a healthy relationship in my life. The dude was super indecisive, and honestly, except for when I asked for it, did not put in very much effort. He got to the point where he got so up in his own head about everything that he wouldn't even kiss me for fuck's sake. Like, I couldn't be with somebody like that. I'm a very affectionate person. So I convinced myself that I was meant to be with this person, and we saw each other for a little while, about a month or so. And any or all red flags I just completely bypassed. Those were gut feelings. I knew in my gut that those things that were happening were not right. And there were points where he was all weird and I was like, look, I deserve better. But I was impulsive, and I thought that the slightest bit of effort meant that things were meant to happen and that I was just being ridiculous. Oh, this is so hard to talk about. eventually we just kind of stopped seeing each other. We stopped talking after I had already left that job. And of course, after telling all of my friends and my family that this guy was so great and that we were meant to be together, I had to tell them that, oops, I was actually ridiculous and this is not what I want, and he was not a good guy, at least not a good guy for me. And so I went on with my delusion that I should be alone and I should be a hoe. I didn't add this earlier because it's difficult to say this as well, but when I am super delusional, I'm convinced that I need to be a hoe. I'm not the kind of person who can detach sex and dating and really all of those things from emotions. I just can't do it. So after I had to leave my job because I ended up having an allergic reaction that was so bad, I was bedridden for 2 weeks and I had a full body rash, all of these wonderful things, I thought that I wanted to sell my own nudes to make money. And I'm not going to talk about that really much. I honestly don't want to. It wasn't something I did for long. It wasn't something that I did for too many people, but I did it and I regret doing it. There's nothing wrong with doing that, by the way. If it's something that, if you are a sex worker or you're a cam girl and that's something that you genuinely don't mind, you enjoy doing, that's okay, and I support you. It's not something that I'm meant to do. It was something I did impulsively because you make a lot of money doing it and you're validated. You're a stimulus monster when you're delusional. You think that you want to do something just because it makes you feel good or you get money out of it or attention, and at least in my case, and that's not really what I wanted. So as the wind is picking up, I really hope you guys appreciated my honesty in this video. It wasn't easy to make, but honestly, I think it was important for people to see that having bipolar 1 isn't just about being up and down, happy and sad. Sometimes it's about making stupid decisions because you're delusional and you literally convince yourself of certain things that in other cases would not be true. If you were level-headed, you would not have been making the same decisions. Let me know how you guys like this video. If you want more story times about things that I did when I was in a psychosis, there's definitely many more that I could talk about. If you have bipolar 1 and you want to talk to me, reach out about your psychoses and delusions and things that you tend to do when you are in a manic episode, please reach out to me. All of my social media will be down in the description below. Leave a comment if you can relate to anything that I mentioned in this video that I've gone through, if you've gone through it yourself, if you know somebody who's gone through it themselves. Honestly, if you're bipolar 1, let me know if you're on any medications, if so, what type. If you're comfortable, of course. Just because I'm personally not on any medications, it definitely makes dealing with things a lot harder. However, I personally just find more power in dealing with these things on my own and being able to recognize the signals that I'm starting to become manic or delusional. And let me know if you want to know some of the coping mechanisms that I use. But other than that, subscribe if you want to see more content like this. Please like this video if you enjoyed it. And honestly, thank you guys so much for watching. Have a fantastic rest of your day, your week, your month, your existence. And stay healthy, stay safe. I love you guys. That is a big ass ant and that is a flying ant. I don't like that at all. That is a big ass flying ant and I don't like it, and it better not fly. It better not fly. Don't fly towards me. I will be so upset. It's wiggling. The thorax is wiggling. I don't like it. Go away.